Hello my fellow gnomes, I am GnomeCode and I'm making this round-based game. Now if you watched the last episode, we showed how to make this round-based system and a timer, but today I'm going to show you guys how to take that and add a little voting system to your game, like you see here, so you can actually choose which one to vote for. Let's get into it. So here we are back in the project file from the previous episode. Obviously if you haven't seen that video, then probably best you do so, but maybe you can follow along anyway. But this is the project that we're working with here. In the last video, we created this UI with just a very basic local script and a txt status. Now we need to create a little interface for our actual voting system. Now I've actually already gone and created this, so I'm just going to paste this in rather than wasting too much time showing you all how to create the UI. But let's just make it visible and I'll kind of talk you through what it is. So it's just basically a frame here, and inside it we have a UI list layout containing these 3 image buttons. Each of these image buttons, you'll notice, has the exact same name as all of our maps. So we've got this one called Exoscape, and it's exactly called Exoscape here. If you spell these slightly differently, then it won't work. And then inside of them, we have a little txt counter, as I've called it. That's just my text label containing this 0. So if I went ahead and I changed the text to blah, 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 then azgazg, it will say instead. But we're going to keep it as 0. And we're going to use this number to represent how many people have voted for each of the maps. And for now, though, we're going to set this to visible equals false, because we don't need it to be visible all the time. So you can create your own UI for this, make it look how you like. But the important thing is, obviously, the frame is going to be called FRM vote. That's what I'm going to be using in my scripts. And make sure those maps buttons are called the same. And you have a txt counter. Now, how is the server going to know which map we have voted for? Well, we're going to use a remote event for this. So let's create a remote event in replicator storage. And we're just going to name this vote. And then inside of our local script, let's first of all get to those buttons inside of the FRM vote folder. So we can just basically loop through all of them. So for I button in GUI.FRM vote, I'm going to get the children, do a little do. Now, of course, not every child element of FRM vote is an image button, because we've got this UI list layout as well. So we're just going to check if the button is a image button, and we'll turn this into a guard clause, what this is known as. So we'll say if it's not that, then continue, and we'll just skip that and carry on. But otherwise, if it is a button, then what we're going to do is we're going to use that vote remote. So how about we go and actually access that. So we're going to need replicator storage. And then we're going to need to get that remote event. So local vote remote will equal replicator storage wait for child vote. And so now whenever they click one of those buttons, so button dot activated, we can connect that into a function, and we'll say vote remote fire server, and we're going to tell the server the name of the button that we've just clicked. So button.name. And so now the server will know what we voted for. We just need to go and now handle all of the voting logic on the server. So inside of our server script, first of all, let's go and grab that remote event again. So vote remote equals replicator storage dot vote. We don't really need to use wait for child when we're on the server. And then we're going to create a new function in addition to these ones we have so far. And we'll just call this something like process vote. And that'll be expecting the player and also their choice. And then we can print out player voted for and their choice. And we're going to run this function whenever vote remote dot on server event, and we'll connect it to this function. So just to test our remote's working perfectly fine, let's just go and make sure our FRM vote thing visible is enabled. There we go. and now if we hit play, and if we click on these, we should see down the output, Gnomeco voted for desert, exoscape, garden, and it's not really doing anything, of course, but we can see it's being sent to the server. That's step one. Okay, so we'll hit stop, and I'm going to hide this frame again, and we're going to go back into our script. And really what we want to do now is we want to toggle this sort of voting stage. So I still want my intermission, but then I want to have like an additional stage between the intermission and running game where we have a sort of voting moment. So let's create a new function, and we're just going to call this get map. And so similarly to when we did our running game and our intermission, we're going to set the status attribute of the workspace to voting. And we're actually going to do a little countdown clock as well. And instead of doing round time, it will be vote time. So let's actually create a variable at the top, local vote time. We'll set this equal to 5 seconds. I think that's plenty of time for voting. So yeah, we're going to have the countdown. We're going to have voting status enabled. And then we're going to need to essentially tally up all the votes that we receive through this function here. So in order to do that, I'm actually going to create a little global table at the top called votes. I'm going to set this to a blank table at the start of the game. And then each time we're running this get map thing, we're going to clear out the table once again. So we're having a fresh table each time we're doing our maps. So how I'm going to set this up here is my votes table is going to be a table containing, and I'm just going to try and draw it out in a comment so you understand what it's going to look like. It's going to equal something like this, and it's going to have the name of each map. So we've got one called desert, and that's going to be a little table within the table. And we're going to have another one called garden, and that's going to be a table like so. And then inside of these tables, we're going to put the player.user ID. So that's going to look something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another one will be 5, 6, 7, 8, and another ID like so. And then we want to count how many items are in each of these. So in this case, desert has 3 IDs inside of it. So there's 3 votes for desert and there's no votes for garden. So desert will be the winner. That's kind of what our table is going to look like when we've got the voting happening. So let's go about actually processing that vote now. So we get the votes table, and then we want to index with the choice. So the choice is going to be one of those strings, the name of the map. And then we're going to create a new index for player.user ID, and we're going to set that equal to true. Now, the only problem here is we're going to be setting potentially multiple votes. So we need to actually remove their previous vote. Because if they click desert and then they click garden, then we're going to have 1 vote for each. And we obviously don't want that. So let's first of all loop through. So for I choice in votes do, and we just want to set whatever they'd currently set. We want to set that to nil before we set anything else to true. So that's processing the vote, but now we need to tally up which is the winning vote. So let's create another function, and we're going to call this get vote tally. And this is actually going to create a new little table inside of it. And so we'll just call this vote count, which will create temporarily to sort of work out and count how much has been voted for on each of them. And then we're going to have a winning score. Initially, that's going to be set to 0, and the winning map or the winning vote, and that will be equal to nil because at the moment we don't have any. And then we're just going to loop through all of those votes we've received. So for choice data in votes do, so choice here is equal to the name, and we essentially just want to set this this tally going. So the vote count for, say, the garden, that's going to be 0, and then we're going to actually count how many there are. So for IV in that data that we have, we actually just want to increment this plus equals 1. So we're just going to add it 1 vote for every ID that we find under that map. And then we can check if this total value, if that's actually greater than the winning score, which initially will be 0. So as soon as there's 1 vote that we're going to have a winner, then our winning score is now equal to this new value. And the winning vote is going to be equal to our new choice. So once we have that winning vote, let's return that back. So return the winning vote. And so now when we call the function getVoteTally down here, we can know what the new map's going to be. Local map equals getVoteTally. Now this is only giving us the name of the map. So really if you call it map name, and let's check first of all if we do have a map name, because remember, if there's no votes at all, then the winning vote is going to be nil. So it's going to be nil that's returned to us. So we need to make sure we actually do have a map name, and also that inside of the maps folder, replicator storage.maps, we can actually find an object. So find first child with that name, because if we can't, then there's no map to copy. So our local map object is either going to be equal to replicator storage dot maps map name, and then we'll clone it to create a copy, or if we don't have our, either we don't have any vote, or somehow they've managed to enter something in which isn't a valid name into their remote, then we can actually just get a random one like we were doing before. So copy this code and place this up here, and then we can delete all of this, delete these 3 lines, and our new map.parent we want to do down here. So this is going to be equal to map object rather than new map, and make sure we set that map object.parent to the workspace. Hopefully you're following along. So either we're going to get the winner of the votes, or we're going to get a random one like before, and we just need to parent it to the workspace. And then let's make sure we're waiting a second as well, just for it to load in. And let's move this stuff from down here in our while loop. So our status, we want to set that as well up here. So now that we've moved all of that logic out of our while loop, well, we actually just need to call it again. So our local new map is now going to equal our get map function, and then we can send our new map to the run game. So if we play now, we're not going to notice any difference, and we still can't vote because we're not enabling our voting frame to be visible or not. But we can see we've got this kind of voting period, right? It's going to wait for a few seconds. It's going to load the map. Then we're actually going to get an error here. We'll come back to that in a moment. But first of all, let's go back into our local script. So we've got if the status is game, or it's intermission, or let's add a new one, or the game status is voting. And if it's that, then we're going to change our text. And then also, if the status is voting, then we can actually do that to toggle whether or not our voting frame is even visible. So GUI.frmVote.visible equals whether or not this is visible. So now if we play, we've got our intermission 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we've got voting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, loading the map, and we've got that error. Let's have a look at, see if we can fix that. So attempt to index nil with spawn. So let's go and see what's happening here on line 39. We're not getting anything into run game. Are we returning from our get map function? We are not. So let's make sure down here we actually return our map object. Otherwise, we're not going to get this new map down here, are we? So there we go. We fixed that. Oh, and there's one more thing we need to do too, which is actually initialize this table. So we're setting it to blank, but also we want it to be filled with all the names of our maps. So let's just loop through those quickly. For I map in replicate the storage dot maps get children do, and we'll say that votes map dot name equals 0. So not 0, equals a blank table. That table that we're going to fill with the user IDs. So now if we're playing, we've got that intermission countdown, and when we get to the end, we've got our voting. We can vote for the Exoscape, the alien model. We can see our vote down here, and we're going to get loaded in, but we didn't get any feedback on our actual vote. We didn't update those counters. So in order to update those counters, we've got to keep the client informed about what the player knows. So we're going to actually need to keep tallying the vote as we go, because at the moment we're only getting this vote tally and we're only counting it once the countdown has completely finished. Whereas really we need to update this tally every time somebody votes so we can figure out who's winning and what the score is. So after we've processed the vote here, let's get that vote tally again. And we've got an issue here. So we'll just move this function up because it's a local function. So it needs to be above this one, like so. So we're going to get the vote tally every time they vote. And then we're also going to get the vote tally before the countdown actually starts. And the reason we're going to keep calling this get vote tallies function is whenever we call that, we're actually going to send remote back to the client. So remember that vote remote we created earlier? Well, let's just go into our get vote tally. And at the very bottom, we're going to say vote remote. And we're going to call the fire all client. So every single player in the game is going to get sent this information. And we're going to send them the vote count data. So it just saves the client from having to do all this tallying themselves. We can just tell them Desert's got 2 votes, Exoscape's got 1, Garden's got 0. And then when the player gets that information, they can then apply it to those counters. So go back into our local script. And now we need to plug ourselves into the vote remote. So vote remote dot on client event, connect that in to a function. We're going to get given the vote tally or the vote count. What do we call it? The vote count. So we'll use the same name here. Why not? So then we just leap through it for name count in the vote count do. And we want to find if there is an image button with that name. Local button will equal GUI.FOM vote find first child with that name. And if we have a button, then we can then update that counter's text. So button dot what I've called the counter again. Let's have a look. It is the txt counter on my project here. So txt counter dot text equals whatever that count is. So now let's hit play. And we see intermission 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we're going to place our vote and it updates to 1. And if we change our vote, so we update for any of these, we can see our vote changes. And it looks like we got in on the desert one there. Interestingly, you'll notice this one I've got damage on these cacti. If I take damage, I'm still damaged when it's the intermission. And so when I start the new round and say I head to the garden this time, we can see this voting's working again. There we go. My player's still damaged, which is fine, but if this is like a fighting game, that wouldn't be what you wanted. So let's just add a little fix for that. If we go into our teleport players function, how about every time we teleport someone, we top up their health as well. So we'll get the humanoid. Humanoid equals player.character, wait for child, humanoid. And then we can say, if we have a humanoid, then humanoid.health equals humanoid.max health. And then let's just get rid of some of these print statements. We don't really need these anymore. Now we've got all of that UI. So it just cleans things up a little bit. I think that's all of them. Okay, we'll hit play one more time and let's test this thing out. We've got our intermission and let's vote for the desert again. And we've got a little voting area and loading the map. We're into the desert. And maybe you'd like the loading the map thing to say the name of the map. Let's set that up in a moment. Am I going to have time to damage myself? No, I've just missed it. But let's just add in that little voting timer for, sorry, not timer, but we'll say the name of the map we're loading. So local message will equal loading ... and then we can say map object dot name, and we'll add in a little ... as well. Okay, so let's pop that message as the new status. Let's try that. We've got our intermission. 3, 2, 1. And we're going to vote for the desert again. And we should see loading desert. There we go. And if I damage myself, but try not to die. Ooh, almost. That was some damage. And let's wait. And we get teleported back. There we go. We've got full health. And if we want, we can vote for something else. Let's vote for the garden level this time. And hopefully we should get the garden. And there we go, loading the garden. So there we have it. We have our working round-based voting system. Hopefully this helps you. Let me know if you're going to make anything cool with this down in the comments below. If you're having issues, then check out our Discord. We've got loads of information on there. And I'll probably have some guides up on my website too at gnome.codes. But until next time, I'll see you in another video. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye!